Hello, welcome to PBN podcasts. We've rebranded from PBN interviews. On the show, we've previously had Presidents Hull, President Lemaire, and President Harris. And now we have another president. We have the 82nd President of the United States, James Hersey. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Mr. President. It is an honor to be here. PBN is a world-renowned and universally trusted group and named after the former president himself. So it is a genuine honor to be here. I thank you for this.
Okay, so you obviously served as president from the 18th of March until the 18th of May, 2023.
You did.
There were a lot of things that happened during that term, to say the least. So
Indeed.
So let's start at the beginning. You've obviously been like speaker many times, governor. I don't know if you've served you probably served in the Senate.
You've 3 times, I believe, yes.
Yeah, you've served like everything, but you hadn't like been president beforehand. So what was your motivation in running in March 2023?
Well, I had sought the office twice before, both times in 2020 and not long after the Great Collapse. The first time I had actually was a Democrat. I had been a prominent Democrat, and I had won the Democratic nomination in an upset against what would eventually become Vice President Wonder. This was a very controversial election, and we ended up coming short against former President Wilson, who himself won a second term to the presidency, and you know how that went. His resignation led to the administration of James Carter, who I personally believe is one of the best post-collapse presidents of my lifetime. But I had then sought the office again later in that same year. However, that was coming off of a lot of circumstances which I don't think were prime at that time, and the campaign didn't do as well as I was hoping. It was an independent campaign at that time, and I decided to take a step back from presidential politics and focus my efforts on more concentrated matters like the speakership and governorship and whatnot. And going into 2023, I had served in your cabinet, and that had reminded me just how much fun I had in federal politics. And I had seen a lot of issues around the country that I didn't feel were being adequately addressed, that I thought were just underhandled or were improperly managed, and that inspired me to jump in. I admit it was a very impromptu decision. A lot of what I do is very sudden.
Yeah.
This was not something I had spent months preparing for. It was mainly I had these built-up energies and these anxieties and worries about the state of our country. And all of a sudden, I, one day decided, okay, you know what? Never mind. I am done staying on the sidelines. I'm going to jump in and see what we can do. And a series of fortunate events, helped propel this candidacy to success. I was an independent who had successfully got the Republican and Socialist nominations for president, That's unheard of. And so we had a massive movement behind us, genuinely historic. And it shows in the end result, 55% of the vote, That's an incredible coalition. And we took it to the White House.
Yeah. So let me just get up the results. You obviously went against, funnily enough, the incumbent President Harris, who has had some concerns over activity. Some might have called you one of the most active presidents we've had, for better or for worse. So let's talk about let's talk about an action you took on basically your first day. This was the first impression in terms of as president. I believe it was executive announcement or executive something. It wasn't executive order. It was like executive presidential order.
Regarding Canada.
Well, does that? I was going to talk about the Antarctica claim to begin with.
Oh, well, that wasn't the first action. That came a few days later. If you want to talk about Antarctica, we can talk about that. You want to talk about Antarctica?
You know what? We'll leave Antarctica for later. We'll talk about Canada. We'll talk about
That's fine.
The Canada thing, which was Executive Order 160. So, obviously Canada, a major ally of the United States, and there have been...
one of our closest.
Yeah, there have been some border disputes in the past, and this was essentially you as the president making official claim to the disputed lands of North Rock and the Machias Seal Islands.
So, if I could.
Okay.
What I had done wasn't anything new. We weren't extending out and grabbing or trying to claim new land that we hadn't already claimed before. What I was doing was reasserting that, yes, we continue to believe that that island is ours, and we continue to hold that it is American territory. Now, my intention was to come to the Prime Minister of Canada and say, we do want this island. We aren't willing to surrender our claim to it. However, because you are our closest ally, and I hold that in great esteem, my intention is to, in some way, pay you or compensate you for the island so that the claim can be mutually beneficial, and that hopefully you can allow us to continue our understanding that this is our island, and you can walk away with something else, that benefits you. Circumstances at the time, which I felt grew out of hand far too quickly, made such a thing unviable, which is why I did back off of it, and I stopped pursuing it. Because at a certain point it became more trouble than it was worth. But my intention was always to compensate for the island, and to make sure that Canada, who I consider one of our closest allies, understood that we always intended to give them something of great value in return for it.
Yeah. So it was essentially almost immediately after you were sworn in, I believe 46 minutes after you were sworn in, and then on the 20th, well, not the 20th, the 19th, sorry, you repealed the executive order. So let's talk about another thing you did right at the start before we talk about Antarctica. And it's something that we both were sort of moderately familiar with. It was the tense discussions over the budget. So I'll tell a bit of a story here, I guess. So essentially, let's go back to March 2023. There was a Republican Senate, I believe a Senate supermajority. It might have been 6-4, might have been 7-3, might have been 8-2. I don't remember exactly. But essentially, obviously, when you have the congressional majority, you're able to push your agenda more so. And one way this was done was through the budget. So there were calls for a balanced budget, which included a lot of cuts to a range of different programs, and also such as the Abraham Act, which has actually come into the public conscience a bit more recently with people like Senator Pluggs, for example. So there was that. There was also things such as corporate tax cuts. There were a lot of provisions in that March 2023 budget, which was vetoed by myself. And then I believe a few days after that, I signed a continuing resolution, which ensured that the government didn't go into... there was a slight shutdown, but it ensured that the government didn't go into a prolonged shutdown. So then, that lasted, I believe, for a week. I'm not 100% sure. It was around a week or 2 weeks. It was... Okay. Yeah, it was until March 20th. So then, obviously, there was the, I don't know how to describe it. It was like the, invasion. I don't know if that's a term of the Capitol building, which I believe resulted in, I believe you got shot during that.
So yeah, that's obviously a very traumatic situation to a lot of people, myself included, but, I don't think it's been talked about as much as it has, and I think opening a dialogue on that is important. They tried to kill us over a shutdown. They tried, a mob of people, of terrorists, tried to murder us over a shutdown, and I am included because, the capital of the United States was under attack. I didn't feel it was proper of me to sit on the sidelines. And, and if you remember, I did what I could to try and lead an evacuation.
Yeah.
I found the vice president. I got him out of there. Yeah, I was shot. But I do, this does go in line with my philosophy that if you're the commander-in-chief and you're the president, you do have to put yourself on the front lines of things like this, and you never expect this is going to happen because you want to believe in your fellow man that they would never devolve into this, but they did. And, but I do believe that the president, if he's physically able, and I am, I'm a young man, I'm not, I'm not as young as I used to be, but I am young enough to, get in there and do my job. I was able to get in and I believe, I like to think that I maybe saved some lives, did what I could to protect, my comrades, my fellow countrymen, and, members of Congress, including my vice president. And I fought back. Because because we had a responsibility to. Congress wasn't under attack and Capitol Police completely failed to protect them.
Yeah.
And so that was a nightmare.
Yeah. So obviously you signed the budget eventually after a continuing not a continuing revolution, a continuing resolution. Two different terms, don't want to get them confused. Because that could be potentially problematic. So this wasn't the last sort of mass demonstration at the Capitol building. There was, of course, I don't know if you were entirely aware, there was the incident, I believe, with President TC being involved to some extent with a march of veterans that ended up getting a bit out of hand and over the Jason Dunham National something or other act. I don't remember the exact name of it. So it's still a problem in terms of people feeling. I don't believe it was for that. I think it was for the Olympia one. It's kind of insane that there were two different ones in a few weeks, but nonetheless, so it does show that in some extreme cases, even today, there were people willing to storm the Capitol building and, engage in frankly, you have a right to protest in this country, for sure.
Right.
But you do not have a right to invade the Capitol building and disrupt proceedings.
I mean, yeah, my view has always been you have a right to protest, you have a right to be furious, and you have a right to make noise, even if it makes people uncomfortable. But you can't hurt people over it.
Yeah.
And you can't destroy. Because in terms of getting support, burning down someone's business, we saw this with the riots in 2020. Burning down businesses is a terrible way of getting support. It just hurts people, and in some cases, the people you're proclaiming that you're there to defend. So it's genuine madness.
Yeah. So let's talk about Antarctica, because it's one of the things that your administration is probably most well known for, the Antarctic policy, which was essentially claiming unclaimed land in Antarctica, I believe for surveying use or science use in general. So
that's what it's used for.
Yeah. So what was the motivation behind that decision, if you can recall?
Well, in general, I have always been very for it. If the United States has the ability to expand peacefully, it should do so. I think it's good for our country. I think it's good for our national identity, our national mood. I think the idea that the U.S.'s borders are set and they can never change is wrong. I do believe that claiming Antarctica was overall a net positive. And I believe so because, well, first off, the treaty we formed and that we led the charge on to protect Antarctica was very clear that we in the Soviet Union, which is now Russia, have the right to claim what is left of unclaimed land. No one else can. Their claims are, by the virtue of the treaty and in the view of the treaty, illegitimate. But ours, should we press our claim to it, would be. Now, I looked at the fact that Antarctica has already, in practice, been claimed by our allies and by our enemies. And I looked at that and said, well, if they're going to maintain their claims, and I don't see why they shouldn't, why would we intentionally hamper ourselves by not pressing our claim to it? Because right now our scientists work in that unclaimed land, and Russia, as you know, is a state that has no regard for international norms, decency, or humanity. There's no reason to think that they've already shown that they are willing to throw any idea of civility out the window by invading and attempting to subjugate a sovereign nation. And so, if they're willing to do that, why wouldn't they make the legal claim to that land in an attempt to pull one over on us or get better access to the Arctic and oceans? Why wouldn't they? That's in their strategic interest, and therefore it's in our strategic interest to beat them to the punch on that. As well, if we didn't, what happens when China does the same thing that the United Kingdom has done, that France has done, that Argentina has done, and they move in, and now our scientists are under their flag, whereas if we claim it, as we've done, it's under an American flag, and they have the rights and protections of American law, and that means that they can continue unhampered and unbothered. Because there was a lot of accusation that I intended to militarize Antarctica. I never said that. I never suggested it or hinted at it. The accusation came from a general sense of, I think you might do it because I think you might do it, with nothing to back it up. And as you know, that did not end up happening because I stayed to what I had said I was going to do. My goal was only ever to expand American territory and protect our interests while preventing a hostile nation from getting one over on us and making sure that our scientists are protected. And we had succeeded in all of those fields. That is official American land now, and it always will be so long as we maintain that we have a right to claim the land we're legally entitled to and makes sense for our national interest to claim. This isn't colonialism. It's not pushing anyone out. We're not pushing out the penguins. It's empty land. that is inhabited by a few scientists, many of whom are Americans. We have a right to grab this land that no one else has claimed. There is nothing that can be considered wrong with that.
So I do believe that, your executive order was repealed at some point and then it was reinstated by, I believe it was either the Lamau administration or the TC administration. And the reinstatement was repealed by the current President Chai Sows. So that is no longer in effect at the moment.
Are you sure? I don't.
Yeah, I can. Okay, so. Oh, sorry. Lamau repealed the Antarctica claim, and then TC reinstated it, and then the incumbent president reversed the decision from the TC administration in Executive Order.
Show me that.
Okay, I believe it's Executive Order 228.
Let me check. Hold on.
Yeah, because he wrote
the thing. He wrote the thing that we did on that.
Okay. So it was Executive Order by TC to reinstate it. It was Executive Order 217. Yes, 217. And then in Executive Order 226, 217 was repealed. Okay. So Executive Order 217 reinstated your Presidential Order 5, and then Executive Order 226 repealed 217, which repeals your Presidential Order. So the current Antarctic policy is no longer in effect. Would you say that's a disappointment? Would you say?
Well, it is. In terms of our national interest, incoherent. Because again, there is no reason not to claim the land we are entitled to. There's no reason other than a vague moral sense that the U.S. doesn't have a right to any land ever, or any further land regardless of circumstance. Which is nonsense. We have a right to that land and to protect our scientists. And that is disappointing. I will see what I can do on that front because that is legitimately disappointing. And the president himself wrote that order. So for him to backtrack is genuinely disappointing. I will see what I can do about that.
Okay. So let's talk about probably the reason a lot of people have tuned in, and that's the most controversial move of your presidency. Any guesses on what the next topic's going to be?
I assume it'll be most controversial. Well, I did issue an executive order outlining that embassies need their host leaders. I assume that's the controversy you're referring to.
Not quite.
So close.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, actually, depending on what you think, it might not be the most. We'll get on to another one because there was a lot of general controversy during your administration for reasonable reasons or unreasonable reasons. Obviously, the assassination of Roman Polanski on Swiss soil, which we still see the effects of today with some. You were obviously gone through this process of first you got arrested, then you got pardoned, then you got arrested by the Swiss government, then you got arrested by Olympia. It was a lot of things. So let's essentially go back to what the initial inciting incident, which was the assassination of Roman Polanski who is essentially a paedophile. Essentially, would you say? You'd say that's a fair characterization.
Yeah, I think at this point it is fair to outright say he's a child molester who molested children.
Okay, so that an assassination ordered, or I don't remember the exact details because it was a year ago, and my mental capacity is kind of
fatigue over this whole situation.
Yeah, so essentially, to the viewers who might not know, I've always said like Roman Polanski was convicted. Not convicted. It was convicted of like a plea deal or something or other in the United States.
What happened was he was convicted of child molestation, of rape of a minor who he had drugged, and he was given initially an unbelievably generous plea deal, but he had learned that the judge had intended to throw it out, and instead sentenced him to 50 years. And on hearing that, instead of face justice, the coward ran, and he scrambled to Europe as fast as he could to escape justice.
So essentially, while watching a film or an opera or whatever it was, there was an assassination on him, and it was
a red carpet attempt. A red carpet.
Yeah, it was ordered, I believe, directly from yourself to the CIA, the CIA director and the CIA no longer exists as an individual entity anymore. So
Director Burley is out of a job and should have happened a long time ago. That coward.
Okay.
He's a bad dude. He is not a good person. I do not like him.
Okay, but
I never liked him.
Let's try and I know it can be like a frustrating sort of general frustration, but let's try and limit the sort of personal attacks on this broadcast.
Oh, of course.
Yep. So obviously it was a party in Bern in Switzerland, a film event party, whatever. So let's go back to that event. What I'm guessing you obviously think that was justified, but others, including myself at the time, and probably still now, I'd say, had concerns. It was essentially an extrajudicial assassination, in that one person shouldn't be able to, especially like the president, shouldn't be able to carry out these sorts of this vigilante justice. I don't know if that's the best way to describe it, but yeah, I'll let you.
Right. So, as a general rule, I'm always very much in favor of limiting the president's power in a lot of areas. I always have been, but I never take anything as an absolute. And in certain circumstances, you are left with choices that, are going to upset people, but you don't really have a better alternative to. For example, in the case of Roman Polanski, the United States had been pursuing him for, what was it? At this point, it was 40, 50 years. He was not in hiding. He was open, right? In France, in Poland, in Switzerland, he was not in hiding. He was very public. He was a millionaire socialite with heavy connections, and who was extremely famous and directing films. He wasn't in hiding. Those governments knew who he was, what he had done, and where he was, and intentionally allowed him to stay. We told Poland that what he had done, and insisted that he be extradited,
they told us no, we will not hand him over. France does not extradite its own citizens. No matter what they do, France will not extradite a French citizen, which Polanski was. And so our options for peacefully retrieving the old man were growing more and more limited, and more unviable. And so when we know that these nations will not peacefully hand him over, despite what he had done, that they were willing to openly defy our request that a man who had done so much damage and hurt an innocent child be brought to justice. They were willing to say, no, we will not hand him over. We don't care. Our ability to, bring this to a peaceful conclusion was becoming more and more limited. And so eventually it came to a circumstance where I saw an opportunity. I recognized that he had to be brought to justice. That just letting him go and letting him get away with it was not acceptable. Because if you do that, if you set that precedent that it doesn't matter who you hurt, you can rape a child, but if you wait out long enough, and if, nations that are your allies will not assist you in handing that monster over, you can just get away with it. I could not let that precedent be set. That this demon would be allowed to die in peace after everything he had done. That was a precedent that, if set, would, I think, have monumentally haunting ramifications. So I did what I thought I had to. And I said, you have an opportunity to liquidate him. You must take it. Now, it's been questioned, why didn't you kidnap him and bring him back? Because that would never have worked. He's a millionaire with constant security and protection, and he was out in public. We were never going to successfully kidnap a 90-year-old and bring him back to the U.S. without killing him. That also put our own agents in immeasurable harm, trying to pull that off. That was never going to work. The only option was, we have an opportunity to remove him now. We're taking the opportunity. He raped an American citizen. He has to die. Justice by the court would have been great, but that's no longer an option given the current set of circumstances. And the court had already deemed he's guilty. He had his day. The day turned against him. He ran instead of face justice. Now, what I also want to state is that I don't believe the reaction to what happened was fair. The Swiss government had a meltdown over what we did. I understand not wanting what you would consider an extrajudicial assassination happening in the country. However, to threaten the world economy over the death of one child rapist is insane. It's deranged behavior. We've given Europe so much. We pay for their militaries. We pay for their protection. We subsidize them so that they can focus on things like healthcare and whatnot. We do so much for them. And they were unwilling to help us bring a rapist to justice. They were entirely unwilling to help us. The reaction from certain countries, I believe, has been genuinely ludicrous. Now, it will be said that what I did was wrong because he did not pose an active threat to American citizens. I reject that claim outright. I reject it. Roman Polanski was a millionaire with rich friends. We already know because of Jeffrey Epstein that pedophile things are run all across the planet. And 40,000 children in the U.S. are kidnapped every year and go missing. That number might be higher or lower, depending on current statistics, but thousands of children are kidnapped. they're not all being kidnapped by men in white vans. A lot of them are being human trafficked. No, it was not unreasonable for me to believe that had Roman Polanski wanted to, and there was no reason to believe he didn't, he would have had access to any child he wanted, including American children. We're the third most populated country.
Yeah.
Those kidnapped children going somewhere. It was not unreasonable to believe that some of them were going to him. So yes, in my view, the child rapist millionaire who had plenty of resources and was on the run had every available ability to continue to abuse American children. And it's not just American children, because I was the leader of the free world, and the U.S. is the leader of the free world. We don't just have a responsibility to American children. I reject the idea that we're only allowed to act if it only directly affects us. The entire planet, I believe we have a responsibility to protect to the best of our abilities. So I would care just as much if it was an American child being raped than if it was a Tanzanian child, or a Somali child, or an Israeli child, or a Brazilian, or a German, or French, or Polish, or Japanese. Children are children. Their right to protection transcends nationhood. And anything that is done to aid that cause, I believe, is worth it. If we have to remove a free on-the-run child rapist to do so when all other options are exhausted, then that is reasonable. It was a reasonable reaction to unreasonable circumstances.
So let's just, so you believe that Mr. Polanski might have been involved in child trafficking, child kidnapping,
of course.
Do you have is that just based on assumptions which potentially valid in this instance, or was there evidence that you'd discovered?
Roman Polanski was a friend of Jeffrey Epstein.
Okay.
Roman Polanski was free. He was free and had resources and friends. Friends who are known to frequent these communities and circles, as was he. He was on the run for raping or molesting a 13-year-old girl. It was not unreasonable for me to assume that he would continue doing so under the belief that he had gotten away with it basically the first time. Why wouldn't he get away with it again? It was not unreasonable. It is a rational response and a reaction to demented circumstances.
Okay. So, you mentioned almost crashing the world economy. Let's talk about another instance. Let's talk about China. Let's talk about. Obviously, there was the execution of. I believe it was former President Miguel. It was Miguel or Sandoval. One of them.
They killed Presidents Wazowski and Sandoval.
Oh yeah, Wazowski.
Two American presidents.
Okay, so we will just go back to that time in your many executive orders. Executive Order 189, imposing sanctions on the People's Republic of China. That trade barriers be imposed, Chinese assets frozen, restrictions on financial transactions, travel ban between the US and China, and then there was Executive Order 190, which revoked the recognition of the People's Republic of China, and describes it as, quote, the new Fourth Reich. So, would you say that characterization as China as the new Fourth Reich would be adequate? Would be not adequate? Would be accurate? Would be
yes.
that you?
Well, very much so. the Chinese government has for years now taken the same leading steps to the Holocaust. Because the Third Reich didn't immediately go from Kurt von Schleider as chancellor to Hitler as chancellor, then a day later the Holocaust begins. It was a slow process. Where first you demonize and ostracize a group of people, you define them as an other who needs to be dealt with. Then, once you're far enough along, you open labor camps, which we're at right now. That is the part of the stage we're at right now on the Holocaust timeline. Labor camps filled to the brim with ethnic minorities and religious minorities. Right?
Yes.
So, it's inconceivable to think that the Chinese government was going to set up these labor camps, right, and eventually decide, okay, you've worked hard enough, you're free to go now, we're going to let you go. That's not what happens. A violent, murderous dictatorship doesn't just eventually release its prisoners and captives. It doesn't do that. That doesn't happen. Germany didn't, the Third Reich didn't do it, and China does not plan to do it. There's no circumstance where they just let the Uyghurs go, which is what I warn against. When it becomes time, and when they deem that it is no longer useful to hold them, you will see mass exterminations of Uyghur Muslims. You will see that. And that is why I outright say they are the Fourth Reich, because they're following directly in those footsteps. A one-party totalitarian government, which is never afraid to threaten war and murder its opponents, begins rounding up religious and ethnic minorities to use them as forced labor. We're following that same timeline now, and it can only end one way. The same way it always does. Mass genocide.
Okay, so you would say that, would you say that your decision sort of flared tensions to one of the greatest points that it's been between the United States and China?
Could you repeat that?
Would you say that your actions in the aftermath of the executions of Presidents Sandoval and Zalski, would you say that sort of inflamed tensions further than you would have liked?
Well, ideally, I would have liked they not murder two American presidents. Ideally, I would have liked that when the first president was killed before my time, the reaction wasn't, whatever. Let them do what they want to do.
Yeah, well,
let them just get away with it.
If I just may, there was a proposal in the aftermath by the notorious and now deceased former Senator Daniel Sullivan, may rest in peace, that would essentially declare war on China based on this, and then of course a month or so afterwards was the Taiwan War, which we if we talked about that, if we talked about everything that I'd mentioned, we'd be here for 7 hours, and obviously a busy schedule for both of us, especially myself. With we do have 2 judicial nominations to handle, so this won't go 7 hours. Unfortunately, I don't think that listeners be particularly tuned in for 7 hours. So, what was I saying?
Maybe another time.
Yeah, so, I was saying about, the China. So, your actions were considered to potentially, cause the potential for an economic catastrophe, economic collapse. If we can if we can just get some tweets up from that. So I know Twitter's can be sometimes a bit weird, but I feel like Twitter is a good indicator of the general mood of the public and of politicians at the time. So let's look at that real quick. Give me 1 moment, please. I apologize. Okay. In fact, I did tweet the foreign policy tip: calling a country illegitimate in the Fourth Reich maybe isn't the best way to approach issues of global importance. Which, maybe the language that he used wasn't particularly diplomatic and stuff. So, let's look at then Pacific Governor Lickington, who called your actions dangerous. And you have former Secretary of State and Defense Connor Wolf saying that you can't remember the correct month. I don't think that's relevant.
I don't know what that's referring to again.
Yeah, I don't know either what malarkey's going on there. But then you have oh I remember that was you, like, you made some sort of edit on an executive order and got, like, arrested or something.
Oh, right.
I don't remember.
I edited the day of what was supposed to be recalling of Congress. I edited the day to, instead of saying today, tomorrow, because it was a grammatical error. And those lunatics arrested me over that. I mean, really? Indicted for that? It was unbelievable.
Yeah, I mean, it was. I don't recall anyone being prosecuted for that in the past, or I don't think anyone's been prosecuted.
It's a double standard.
It is like it is a crime that's under the law. It could be classified as a crime. That's where I'll leave it at. So again, another tweet by me. The law-breaking, credibility-destroying, alliance-smashing, economy-wrecking, war criminal, irresponsible jabroni of a president must resign. That's harsh language, but I feel it was justified.
Well, he would get what he wanted, eventually.
Yeah. Former Vice President, Corey Clark asked, are we willing to risk our country's safety in the process, in terms of the consequences?
So, I'll make it clear, I was against Sullivan's declaration of war, because my intention is not to start World War III, but you had to do something.
Yeah, but did you believe that this could have potentially started or brought us closer towards World War III? Your actions.
I don't necessarily believe so, because despite China's erratic and unhinged behavior, they know in a conflict, we've already beaten them once, right? If they had genuinely pursued a conflict with us, I would not have spared that government. I would not have spared them. If they had genuinely went into conflict with us, when we beat them, that would have been the end of the Communist Party, of the Communist Party of China.
Okay.
So I think they knew that. They knew how I was not going to be kind to them if it genuinely came down to it. And so they were, I do believe that, they weren't going to, as as irrationally and insane as they had acted, there was a limit, and I had a limit as well, because again, it was about the precedent. We could not set the precedent that you're allowed to murder our elected leadership and get away with it.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
I have a lot of respect for President Jack Francis. He's a friend of mine.
Yeah.
But I have never been so humiliated in my entire life when I read his executive order that begged for forgiveness from China when he took over. He begged China for forgiveness. You don't do that. Listen, I don't care what we did. You do not beg your enemy to forgive you. You don't grovel and tell him how sorry you are. You don't revoke pseudo recognition of what we had at the time of Taiwan.
Yeah.
You don't do that. That was a horrifying idea, and it had set the precedent for what I think came later. We set by basically having the mindset of, okay, you killed our president, please forgive us. That set the precedent for them in the future to feel emboldened to kill Sandoval, to murder him. So I had to reverse that. I had to. Because imagine if you went to China and they kidnapped you and they murdered you because maybe you weren't as friendly to them as they liked. And imagine if the incumbent president said, well, we're really sorry that President Tru's offended you like that. Would you please forgive us? That would have been the ultimate betrayal. And it happened twice now. It had already happened once, and it happened twice. I wasn't going to let it happen a third time to any of us.
Mm. Yeah. So let's look at some more comments from you had obviously the bill in the Senate to overturn the sanctions implemented, which would essentially shut down, which then Senator Sigi, former president, described as shutting down all trade between the US and China. So you believe that shutting down that trade, which amounts in the hundreds of billions, was justified.
If I remember correctly, it wasn't an immediate no trade, it's all over. It was directing the Secretary of the Treasury to begin moving the economy away from Chinese domination, which was always the intention. Regardless of what they did, our economy should not be tied so heavily to another economy, especially one like that. So no matter what, I was always going to want to move us away from that current circumstance, because it's untenable. It prevents us from protecting human rights, and it's just not acceptable. It is just not acceptable. And so I recognize that we did need to move away from that. It's just that, the circumstances, push things further than, and make things more important to get done immediately than maybe they had to be before.
Yeah. So, again, there have been some tensions more recently with China, most evident in the Nicaragua incident with China, essentially the Cuban Missile Crisis, but with Nicaragua and China instead of Cuban Soviet Union. There was, and this was partially under the Bush administration, which I was vice president. I obviously can't disclose confidential information because that would be a crime, and I don't want to get arrested for what I've said on the podcast. I'm sure you don't either. It's not worth it to leak classified information to people who shouldn't know about it. But nonetheless, there was the Nicaragua incident. It looked like it was heading towards a conflict in terms of naval presence between China and the United States. But eventually China backed down and didn't finish the transport. They did claim that the transport was for like civilian aid. I believe like food was like claim. I don't remember the exact claim, but something along those lines. Let's go with that. Which intelligence potentially said otherwise, especially intelligence that the following administration and the TC administration had made public by saying that, look, they have like ICBM or the potential for ballistic missiles. What were your general thoughts on this situation?
Well, as you have said, back down. That's what happens when you assert American power. There's only so far they can push. Because the truth is, no, we are more powerful. If you don't, give into the idea that we're somehow equal powers, or they're stronger than us, or we have to make concessions, they will eventually blink first, because they have to. Because they have no choice in the matter. If you just stand up for America, and you defend us, and you don't back down, you don't grovel, you don't apologize, you don't treat them as a rational actor who you can reason with, or you can work in good faith with, because they're not, and they keep showing you they're not. You have to treat them as what they are, a hostile power. You don't go to war with them, because you're not trying to start World War III, but you also understand that they are not your friend, that they're not rational, and that they're never going to come to any negotiating table in good faith, because that's not their goal. Their goal is to destroy the United States, because we keep stopping them and interfering with their plans for regional and global hegemony, and we're never going to stop. So they need us to collapse. Then with Russia, they need us to fall apart, because if we fall, no one else is equipped to stop them. So they need us out, which is why it's so important that we do not falter. And one way you ensure that you don't falter is you don't bend to them. When they push, you stand still and wait for them to fall back.
Okay, so you believe that the US was justified in that situation as a general, like?
Yes.
Okay.
Even if I didn't think we're justified, I'm an American.
Yeah.
Even if I thought we were wrong, I'm never going to take China's side. I'm an American. You do not ally with the enemy. Even if you have it wrong. You try what you can to get it right, but you do not ally with the enemy, and you don't grovel to them.
Yeah. Okay. So we've talked about a lot of foreign policy. Let's talk about the current election. The election race is heating up. You have for the presidency on one side, you have former president, albeit for like a few days. I don't know if that counts, but technically it counts. But also acting president for a while of Connor House, who's obviously has a long career in politics with former President Holly Howard as his running mate, and then on the Republican side you have former President Axel Hersey, who was president for a few days, served as vice president under the TC administration, with the vice presidential pick of Ophelia Callis, who's been speaking many times, like yourself. It's been a lot of different roles, and then you obviously have perennial candidate, current senator Alexander Morales. Yeah. So I believe you support Axel Hersey in this race. Not a surprise considering the last name connection. Yeah. So what about the policies in particular? Would you say if you were able to you like from the Axel Hersey campaign?
Well, despite everything, and this, I think it's definitely possible to forget about this, but I am still a conservative, right? I've been the Democratic nominee and party leader, for president and party leader. I've been a Democratic senator and governor, yes. But I've also been the Republican party leader and Republican senator, Republican speaker of the House, and nominee for president. And I am a conservative. So I am going to, generally side with the conservative candidate, because they're going to align more so with my values and my ideals. I haven't got now, the election is a little bit of ways out, not too long, but a little bit. And so I do want to take a deeper dive into both platforms. But I have respect for both. I would sleep easily at night, regardless of who wins.
Yeah.
Holly Toward is a close friend of mine. She was president when I was Speaker of the House. We got into a car crash together. That was a bonding moment.
Yeah.
She's a very close friend of mine. I've worked with Athena Callis. I've worked with her before. I have extreme amounts of faith in Axel.
Yeah.
I think she's going to do us very proud. I have very good and strong confidence in her.
Okay. So, well, let's keep talking about current affairs. One race that's been focused on is the Pacifica Senate race, which a seat held by incumbent Senator Ross, who's been senator for God knows how long.
A little while.
Yeah, I served a 9-month term from, I believe, June 2022 until January. In March, April, it was a long time. Served and running against the current Speaker of the House, Walter Morning. And this debate has received a lot of attention, let's just say, about the two candidates seemingly. I'll read out some of the responses. Hello, people of Pacifica. I think Ross is really cool. I also agree. I would love to inform that Walter is a great person and great member of this district. I think both Senator Ross and I believe that this is a developing situation. My top priority will be serving the Pacifica people, just like I and Ross have worked together for years to do previously. It will be what I've been doing for the past time, serving and putting the Pacific first in Washington, just like what Walter and I have been doing in the state legislature and other offices. Denny's is better than IHOP. I'd have to completely agree with Senator Ross's answer about Denny's superiority over IHOP. If you notice a trend here, it's that there's been no policy being spoken. And
right.
There's been more discussion about IHOP and Denny's than what these candidates would actually do. It's good to see some level of bipartisanship, but this seems a bit a bit strange. What are your thoughts on this situation? What do you say?
Well, I think I like both of them. I trust both of them, but it is a disservice to run for the Senate while not, proposing policy you actually believe in of any kind. I don't know if either of these platforms.
They have not. They have not.
Okay. I admit that is concerning. That is unfortunate.
I don't think any candidate has released a platform as of yet. I believe that the presidential campaigns of the two major parties are working on the platform, but I've not heard much else from the campaigns. I've heard a bit from the. In fact, let's talk about the speaker. The speaker did say that they wouldn't campaign, which is a bit of a questionable decision. But
that's interesting.
Yep. So let's try and find it. We've talked about China, we've talked about current affairs, we've talked about Rome. Let's talk about Peter Scully. You know who he is, right? I'm pretty sure. I know
who he was.
Who he was, yeah, because he's dead. So let's I was about to say viewers, and I was about to say readers. For the listeners, because you do not read a podcast unless this quote comes up in the newspaper. In which case, hello people who are reading. So you had Peter Scully, who was in a prison in the Philippines.
Right.
The Philippines being a decently close ally, I'd say, of the US, and having some historical ties through American ownership of the Philippines after the war with Spain, which also involved Cuba. So he was in a Filipino prison, and again, with suspected CIA under the orders of yourself. Peter Scully was assassinated in prison, and it also was a prison riot was a prison riot occurred, which took the life of Peter Scully, and also took the life of a prison guard in the Philippines. So this situation, I'd say, would you agree with me in saying like this situation has slightly different to the Roman Polanski situation, but in terms of their like crimes, you would say similar in that regard?
I would say the scope of what Scully did. Abusing a child sexually in any way should be an automatic death offense. That's very easy. But one was absolutely more horrifying. What Peter Scully did was he ran a global child pornography video abuse ring. And he did the rapes and he murdered an infant girl. That is, I wish I killed him with my bare hands.
Yeah.
And I absolutely would have the ability. I would have loved to kill him myself. The reason why he was also targeted, the reason why was, in his case, large amounts of evidence incriminating him were destroyed in a quote-unquote fire that was supposedly an accident. I don't believe for a fact it was. You don't accidentally set fire to mass amounts of evidence incriminating one of the worst child pornographers in human history. You don't accidentally burn that. It was absolutely intentional. And off that reasoning, if that level of corruption already existed, it was not inconceivable to me, again, that something could successfully lead to his escape. Those are not the highest quality prisons. They are not as secure as ours. They are not as well built as ours or well staffed. It was not unreasonable to think that it was possible for him to escape, and if he did so, the damage he could do, and the people he could, and the more children he could hurt, because he's a psychopath with no ability for compassion or reflection. So again, he absolutely would have, and if he could have, and I made sure he never could. Now, on the topic of the riot that took the life of an innocent guard, I was not informed the means in which Scully would be removed. If I had told beforehand that they would attempt a prison riot, I would not have given the okay, because I would have believed that would have posed the risk for unintentional damage.
Yeah,
I was not informed that that's how it's move forward. And I take responsibility for how that ended, because ultimately I didn't need the buck to stop with me. but I would not have agreed to such thing if I had been informed beforehand of how they intended to go through it.
Yeah. Okay. So you believe your intentions were like in the name of justice. So you wouldn't say that justice was given through that. I not even a life sentence, like I double, triple, quadruple, hextuple, death sentence, not death sentence, life sentence, of this criminal.
You know, I believe in an old Roman custom that murder and crimes of that such pollute society. That things like murder and rape have an actual effect on our society. A pollution. That it makes society worse. And allowing someone like that to live, even in prison, I do genuinely believe is in and of itself harm. And I'm very much of the view that a crime like that must be punished by death. That's the only reasonable way to go about this.
Okay.
That's how I feel.
Okay, so you did mention the death sentence. Let's talk about that slightly more. There's obviously been a bill that's, I believe, is currently in the House. It's in the House, or it's been passed from the House. One of them, we'll go with it's been in the House. Let's get this up real quick. Essentially, a bill, a constitutional amendment to abolish, to more formally abolish the death penalty. So, essentially, shall not deprive the right to life on account of criminal conviction by any court of law which may be created or have been created under jurisdiction of the United States, blah, blah, blah. Essentially, prohibit the judicial executions of people. Would you...
I am opposed.
So you're opposed to this? Okay.
Correct.
Can you... You've already said, but can you elaborate a bit further?
Sure. I'm opposed to it because, like I said, I am a massive believer in rehabilitation. I think that's what prisons should be used for. I don't believe in holding people like animals. With that being said, I don't believe that every crime is rehabilitatable. And I don't believe every person, if you want to call them people, can be rehabilitated. I think that there are some crimes that are so vicious that it is not possible to rehabilitate. You shouldn't try. Right? I believe that in such cases, the punishment has to be death, because there's no that you can't reintegrate them with society, which has to be the purpose of prison, to make someone better, fix what's wrong, and reintegrate them with society. You can't do that here. It's not possible.
Yeah.
So trying is a waste of time. You can't rehabilitate Ted Bundy, and you couldn't rehabilitate Peter Scully. It's just not going to work.
Yeah. Okay. So
that's my view.
Okay, we have some time. We'll do some more quick fire questions. So we've done some quick fire questions in the past on this show. Essentially, we try to keep the answers short, succinct. I'll just, there might even be some like yes or no questions. So let's begin. So, what do you think is the single biggest issue facing the country at the moment?
I think instability. Do you ever get the feeling that the world has gone absolutely insane since the end of 2019?
Perhaps. Yeah.
Instability.
Just in general, like global instability?
Global instability.
Okay.
Yes, I would say so.
Okay. Let's touch on hot topic issue. Thoughts on abortion?
I'm pro-life. I believe in easy access to contraceptives because they reliably lower abortion rates. I don't believe in abortion for incest. I think that's eugenics. I do believe in abortion in terms of protecting the mother if her life comes to that, but I don't believe in no reason abortion, meaning an abortion for any reason. I'm very much opposed to that.
Okay, so would you say it's for abortion ban on this? So, like, at what time?
I am not the most up to date with the science to give you an exact 15, 14, 6 week. I'm not, fit to determine the exact specifics, but as a general rule, like I said, this issue generally goes away if everyone who needs contraceptives has access to them. I don't like contraceptives in terms of, it promotes this situation, but it has results. My goal is to stop abortion. Contraception does that. Therefore, I am heavily pro-contraception.
Yeah. Okay. Do you believe climate change is a real a real threat?
Yes.
Okay. What was your favorite part of being president?
My favorite part, I liked connecting with people. I liked listening to them, hearing their stories, and doing what I could to raise the quality of life, even by a little. I like doing that. That's why I do any of this. I like people and working to their benefit. There's no point otherwise.
In 5 words or fewer, how would you describe the current administration?
Calm and steady wins the race.
That's 6 words, but it's fine. It's not like you were on death row or anything. Yeah. So healthcare. Do you believe in a public option or privatization?
I believe in universal healthcare. I'm not opposed to the existence of private healthcare, but I'm not loyal to it. I believe in I think that every American should have access to universal healthcare, good quality healthcare.
Okay. Let's just finish this up with let's talk about you as speaker. You've obviously been speaker countless times. Besides the presidency, it's probably the thing that you're most known for. But also,
possibly,
perhaps known for being vacated a few times, but
unreelected.
Yeah. Yeah. So, as speaker, how would you say your speakerships differed from time to time? Because obviously you served as speaker in 2020, and you served in speaker as recently as 2023. So what would you say is
I was speaker in 2021 and 23. Active. That's I think always one of my strong suits. My activity. We're always active. Anytime I'm in a speakership, always active, always working to assemble a strong team of veterans and newcomers. And I do so because I follow the philosophy of speech constrictor. And what he did was he always had his team. I call the term team, but he always had a speaker team of people who were veterans who knew procedure well and who knew how to take command at a moment's notice. And the other half of the people who had never presided in their lives didn't know anything of what they were doing. And they were there to learn, to get a feel for things and to learn how to govern the house and how to preside. And I left that philosophy because I was a beneficiary of it. I was a part of that team of people who didn't know how to preside, who didn't know what they were doing, and I had to learn. And I very much have that opportunity, and I'm a massive fan of giving out to others. And it's produced a lot of speakers. You know, my team has produced speakers like Corey Clark, Oliver Hersey, Xander Costa, Alexander Tempest, people like that. Good speakers have come out of that. Who have served that team, who originated on my team. So I am very proud of that. That was something that was panned at the time. They said it was too big. It was too big a team. I had too many people that I should have 2 people on my team, or maybe 4. But that defeats the entire purpose of what I wanted to do, which was have a massive team of people who can always preside and who can always learn. And on that front, we always succeeded.
Yeah. Okay. Which speakership time would you say was your well, let's say which one was your most successful and which one was your favorite?
I like a lot of I would have said the most recent one until the end, because how they handled that was a disgrace. You had a rogue attorney general who's prosecuting a former president and who has him arrested on the floor of the House. That's unacceptable. Before that, we were doing very well. We were doing so well before that, and things were doing well. I liked it in 2021 because I didn't like the insane removals. Right? There's always this idea that I was vacated and I was removed. That's not entirely honest. The first time, I wasn't removed by the House. I was removed by unanimous consent because that vote to vacate was buried and waited long enough for it to go into unanimous consent. The House never removed me. It was one guy who didn't like me and who wanted me gone and got his way, and then I came back. And then you had, after that, the return of some disgruntled politicians who were upset that I had beat them in an election and who were then hell-bent on my removal on that basis alone, right? Regardless of what the House wanted. But the House then got to say again, chose once again to re-elect me. The House, assembled has never once chosen to remove me. It's always been a few individuals who then the House rebukes by electing me again. I'm always very popular with the House. You have my impeachments, right? Which aren't impeachments because they never passed. They didn't even pass the House, right? You had that whole catastrophe, and it couldn't even get through the House. The House has always been very favorable towards me. They've always loved me. They've always been on my side. I very much like my terms of speaking. We've always got good stuff done. I think, though, my favorite was my first term, because that's when the majority of my reforms went into place for the first time. And I had a lot of fun. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah. So, do you want to guess, like, how long this has been going?
We've been, if I had to throw a dart at the wall, 1 hour and 26 minutes and 17 seconds.
Close. 1 hour 23:40. So, quite a while. So I'll wrap this up. So if you have you're on PBN speaking to countless people, what would your parting message be to the listeners?
Never become cynical. It's impossible to neglect the fact that yes, our world has gone insane. And things don't always seem hopeful, and the world does constantly seem to be out of control. But you always have the power to take back control. Always you have that power. And we are blessed to live in a country where you have the right to choose your own destiny and the destiny of your countrymen via the electoral process. That's always your right. make good use of it. Never forget how powerful that is. How much of a blessing it is to live in the most powerful, most wealthy, the most culturally advanced nation in the history of the world, and be thankful that nation is a democracy, because that's not a guarantee.
Yeah. Okay.
Be thankful for your loved ones and for your country.
Yeah. Thank you for being on this show.
Of course.
I hope that the listeners at home have found this very insightful. Personally, I have found this to be very, very productive, and hopefully we could see more people on this show in the future. So stay tuned for that. Thank you, and
stay tuned.
And have a good rest of your day, whether it's morning, evening, afternoon, night, whatever. Have a good rest of your day, and
thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you for being on here. Thank you.
Good night.